Hello and welcome back to the True Crime Comedy Podcast, Murderess Podcast. I am your host, Sidney Smith. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It's nighttime for me, but it's daytime for you, or it's whatever time. You know why? Because I'm doing this show live in video now. So now it's on YouTube. You can watch it anytime. You can watch it as much as you want. You guys can send me in all kind of shitty ass comments. If you don't like my t-shirt, this is my How Are You Murderous Podcast t-shirt. You can go out and you can get one of those by going to murderouspodcast.com. Super easy, super easy. If you've never listened to this podcast before, or this is your first time finding me now, this is a podcast where we talk about nothing but female killers. That is what we do. You will see different people sitting over in these other seats from time to time until I find my new co-host. For those of you who've been rocking with me since day one, just completely off podcasting, just off audio, you remember my original guest co-host, or I shouldn't say guest, but my original co-host, Jamie Kamara. So you got to find somebody to replace him. But until then, it's just my beautiful face up here on camera for you, man. That's it. That's what I got for you. But I do want to thank you guys for checking me out. I do appreciate the support. I appreciate everybody bugging the shit out of me for the last couple of weeks because you haven't heard a podcast in a couple of weeks. Taryn, Bruce, you know who you are. I appreciate the text messages. I appreciate the emails. I appreciate all that shit. That just lets me know that the podcast is loved and is supported. So thank you guys very much. But this is what I've been working on. Not working on like I built this. This is not my garage. This is not me. I have a lot of talents, but this ain't one of them. This comes to all of us courtesy of Flow Productions. So shout out to Flow Productions, Jared, Cassie, the whole crew, those guys on the other side of that wall over there. I would have said more names, but I'm for sure know one, didn't know the other, and I don't need to fight anybody in the parking lot. Once we work a little longer together, I'll get everybody's names down, but these are some of the best Caucasian people I've ever met, and I'm very happy to be in the studio with them. I think I hear some people over there laughing. That's what you always want to do. You want to make sure they're happy over there. So thank these guys for knocking it out. It is a beautiful space. Got the logo up there back behind me. When you guys can probably see it on the wide shots. There it is right there. So it's a beautiful thing. I love it. I love it. I love it. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump into this thing. You guys know how I do it. First thing we're going to do a little bit of banter on some shit that's on my mind. Top of line for me as I scroll up here on the screen would be this. That bitch Amber Heard. All right. Look, I don't get into a lot of pop culture shit, but when some downright dirty shit, and you can have your opinion. This is America. We can have it. We can talk about anything under the sun, and you're allowed to have it. Hell, there is a Baptist preacher in Texas who just said that all homosexuals should be tried, found guilty, convicted, and then taken out and shot in the back of the head. And people call the cops to complain. And you know what they said? Free speech. Free speech. So we all have free speech. My free speech on the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp shit is this. Bitch, 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 bitch. I've never, ever, this is the reason why most entertainers, if you're smart, you protect yourself. Because this shit is crazy. Absolutely crazy. I was really someone who was ignoring it. And the reason I'm talking about it is because I haven't been with y'all in a couple of weeks and I got to get this off my chest. I was ignoring it for the most part until I was sitting at home and I had the TV going in the office behind me and I'm just tapping away. And I hear some evidence that she actually went and photoshopped, changed the pictures so she looked like she had bruises. And that caught my eye. And so that trial really pulled me in. And it just made me think about so many different other instances where an entertainer, ball player, you name it, has found himself. And it's not that it doesn't happen to women, but they don't talk about it, so I don't talk about it. Found himself in some shit. And Amber Heard is one of the worst. The only way she could have been dirtier is if she had have, and I didn't hear it, so if you guys correct me if I'm wrong, murderspodcast.com, send it in to me. If she had cried rape along with everything else, the abuse, the lying, the videos of her going up an elevator with James Franco to go into the home that she shared with Johnny Depp until she had the locks changed on it. Absolutely ridiculous. I think a lot of other men would have lost their minds. She's lucky she was fucking with Johnny Depp. I'm not sure she makes it to trial if she's fucking with anybody else who maybe doesn't have that kind of bread or maybe doesn't have the common sense or whatever have you. But she brings a whole new I wanted to use the C word so bad, and I was using it with some folks, but I'm not going to use it here because there may be some people listening who are a little offended by it. But I will say this: I haven't met one woman that I know who rides with this bitch. Not one, not a one. I saw her this morning. I like to watch the news before I get out of bed. It kind of helps me kick off my day. And Savannah Guthrie, I believe that's her name. She's one of the hosts on the Today Show. She's also an attorney. She had her on this morning. And she was questioning her about a lot of the different things that Amber has said over the, 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever that trial went. And Savannah really nailed her ass to the wall, and I loved it. I loved that because at first I thought this was just going to be some bubblegum type bullshit. And it turned no, Savannah went after her like she was a prosecutor, and I absolutely loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. She questioned her on some of the things that she had said during the trial, where she admitted that she had been the instigator. She had been the individual who was actually committing the violent acts, being physical with Johnny. And the thing that really I loved about it, and I'm not a guy who really enjoys watching the Today Show. The thing that got me was that this was going to be an interview with Amber Heard. Amber says, well, that was only a 30-second minute clip within a 2-3 hour time frame. And Savannah asked her, well, why didn't your lawyers pony up the 2 to 3 hours? And Amber had no real good reason for that. So I loved how she went after her. I loved that the jury came back with the way they came back. I loved that they could see through all of the fake acting and the fake tears and let me give you just a little taste of it. The look away, and then let's bring it back to you. And then I'm tearing up, and let me just show you the emotion. I love the fact that they saw through all of that. I like to see more females dealt the way that Amber was dealt with. I personally would like to see Amber thrown in jail. I would have loved that because what we are seeing, while we are seeing an uplifting of people with vaginas, we're also seeing punishments being handed out to those same people when you think you're going to get away with things like this because you have a vagina. And there are people out there who are going to disagree with me on this. I don't care. Again, like I started this off before I said it's free speech. We all have a right to believe and say what we want to say. Hell, there's half of this country out there still thinks Trump is president. So we all have a right to say and express ourselves the way we want to. But I'm glad that they hammered her ass the way that they hammered her. Now, conversely, when you look at Deshaun Watson, I was with that guy. I was riding with him hard from the very beginning. I was. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm like a lot of dudes who were, but I'm the only guy that would tell you right out off the back. I was riding with them. A lot of guys can't because they have girlfriends, they have daughters, they have mothers. Obviously, we all have mothers. They have wives. And so there's a lot of times where things happen and it concerns women. The man in your life will not be honest with you. You would try to have the conversation with him. He won't have it with you. At least he won't have an honest one with you. I will. And I'm going to tell you that me and at least 50% of the other men on this planet, if not just in this country, if I keep it conservative, we're riding with Deshaun because here you are, a good-looking dude with the money, so on and so forth. And the other aspect of it, as a black man speaking about a black man, and we were having these conversations at the barbershop, we were having these conversations at the cigar spot. We were talking about this as well, over playing spades. For you white people, that's euchre. We were having these conversations. And a lot of it was, we knew that the Houston Texans, so at least we felt that the Houston Texans were doing Deshaun Watson wrong, because it wasn't until he wanted out before all of these things came out. And so then you hear about the ownership being tied in with this lawyer and that lawyer and so on and so forth and all these different things. Then you have the escalating number of women coming out, 2, 3, 4, until it got to be 20, 22, 23. Now I believe the 24th one just came out. Here's the thing that threw everything out of whack for me, was when it came out last week that the Houston Texans were actually giving forms to Deshaun Watson to hand out to the massage therapist he was having to come to his home or come to wherever he was to get this. When your employer hands you forms, non-disclosure forms, to give to these women who supposedly are just doing routine massages, then you know everybody is in on it. And so now we see that the ladies have now come out, and I believe there's an even larger lawsuit now because now they've rolled the Texans into it as well. As well they should. And so my biggest problem with Deshaun is this. One, you should never, ever, 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 ever push yourself sexually or any other way onto a woman. Ever. It's not allowed. It's not cool. I don't care if you're the brokest guy at the bar or you have all the money in the world like Deshaun Watson does. My other problem with him is this. How can you be the quarterback for the Houston Texans and get in this kind of trouble? Derek Jeter has shown every athlete following him during his time the way. Now, rumors are to be true, and I believe they are because everyone says it. Derek Jeter would have the women come to the house. You had to give up everything that you had that you came in with, purse, cell phone, whatever. Take it all off, put it over here. Treat you like you're going through TSA at Derek Jeter's house. Now I need you to sign this form here. Not because I'm going to rape you, but because I don't want anything that happens in this house sexually or whatever, because I don't know what Derek Jeter is into. Neither does he want the world to know what he's into. Sign this, and then we go on and we proceed for the rest of our evening. In the morning, I give you a nice Yankee swag bag with whatever goodies he got from the Yankees, because I'm sure the Yankees were in on that as well. And you go about your day. 20 years, this man. 20 years, he was arguably the best shortstop in the league, on the hottest team in the league, winning championship after championship after championship. Never had any trouble. So how does Deshaun Watson get into this kind of shit? Finally, with Deshaun Watson, if I had one other bone to pick with this guy, you down in Texas, man. Everybody who's been to Texas, been through Texas, met a woman from Texas, you know the females in Texas are fine as fuck. They got a couple that, they snuck in somewhere. They missing a chromosome. They're, walking around in Texas. But for the most part, those are some beautiful women in Texas. How the hell do you leave Texas women to go to Cleveland to fuck with Cleveland women? Have you seen what the bitches look like in Ohio? Now, some of you say I say that because I'm from Michigan. 99% true. The other 0.1% of it is true too. It's still true because those are some ugly bitches. You could have went anywhere. You could have went to Miami. You could have went to New Orleans. You could have went to Jacksonville. You could have went anywhere. I don't know why you chose to go to Cleveland to look for massage therapists up there. That is a losing proposition. Damn the football team. That is a losing proposition anytime you bring Ohio into anything. And with all of that said, fuck the Buckeyes. All right, so before we jump into the story at hand, I want to let you guys in on a couple of different things that I have going right now. You guys see the new digs here. We shouted out Flow Productions. They've done an amazing job. But Murderess podcast is now part of, and I probably shouldn't be turning my head, but I'm going to because I want to point right at this. Now a part of You Hear Good Things podcast network. So I want you guys to keep an eye out for some other things that we're going to be tied to as well. So I'm very proud of that. I got my show, If You're in the Valley, the National Spelling Buzz will be coming back to CB Live on June 29th at 8 p.m. You can go get tickets for that right now. And you can listen to this and get on your phone and go to my website, Sidney Smith Cre8tiv, CRE8tiv.com, and get your tickets right now. Also, you can go to my website and snag your tickets to see me hitting the stage with Josh Wolf on July 1st. At Stand Up Live. Again, if you're in the Valley, or hell, you just want to fly into the Valley and hang out, come and do that too. We're going to be down at Stand Up Live July 1st, 2 shows. Can't wait to be a part of that. This is something that Josh has been producing and doing around the country for quite some time. I think he's got some big ideas with it. We're going to be taking a couple of friends of mine who've never done comedy before, put them on stage with their own material, let them do what they do, bring them back into the green room. They'll get a chance to discuss that material with professionals, myself, Josh, and I think there may be another person on the show. And then we'll send them back out. So you want to be a part of that as well. Again, go to my website, Sidney Smith Cre8tiv, CRE8tiv.com, and get your tickets for that. With all that said, man, let's go ahead and jump right into this podcast right here. This week's Murderess is the young Darlie Routier. Darlie, blonde, hazel-eyed, was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania on January 4th, 1970. The firstborn child of Darlie and Larry Peck. She was doted on as a child. Her first encounter with the harshness of life occurred at 7 years old, when her parents divorced, and the domestic security she knew tilted. A year later, her mother remarried a man named Dennis Stahl, and as Darlie entered her teens, The family moved to the vastly different climate of Lubbock, Texas. Little Darlie and her siblings, 2 natural and 2 stepsisters, got on together well and helped each other through the difficult transition of hometowns and schools. The toughest part of their young lives was having to endure their parents' constant squabbling and sometimes violent fighting. And I know what that was like because I and my siblings went through that same shit growing up. So there can be some emotional. There can be some mental that goes along with that when you're a child. There's 4 of us as well. And I only stop to say that because there may be some people out there who grew up in a great environment and your parents got along. Nobody's parents get along. It's not 100% perfect, but maybe you never dealt with any of this. So eventually the Stahl's marriage faded and Darlie's mother was once again in search of a new spouse and her girls were without a father figure. Darlie, despite her new surroundings, emerged from a shy cocoon into a blossoming, sometimes, according to her classmates, over-showy teenager. Boys were attracted to her, including one named Darlie Routier. As a teenager, he worked as a busboy in the Western Sizzler restaurant alongside Mama Darlie. The mother found him a bright, talkative, good-looking boy with ambitious plans for his future. He would be, she figured, a good catch for her oldest daughter. Playing matchmaker, she introduced the 2 kids, and by all reports, it was love at first sight for both of them. The dark-haired tall boy with wavy hair flipped for the 5'3", hard-faced Lubbock Belle with the big eyes, and she, in turn, for him. They dated in high school and continued to correspond after Darren, 2 years older than she, went away to a technical college in Dallas. Things to come occurred at Darren's going-away party. There, according to a friend named Darlie, showed a possessive and cunning nature that lay hidden under her surface. So even early on, certain people got a chance to notice things. And it's no one's fault. People are not always going to be naturally observant, especially of kids. And I find that to be true of most parents, whether it's your child or another child. I like to think of myself as naturally observant. I just feel like I am, and I kind of have to be. By profession, I'm a stand-up comic, and most comics are observative. Darlie was annoyed that she wasn't getting enough attention, so she left the party. Then she came back frantic, claiming that someone had tried to rape her. That ruse gave her just the attention she craved. After graduating high school, Darlie joined her boyfriend in Dallas, where he had been hired as a technician at a computer chip company. Landing a job with the same firm, the couple lived together while saving their money until, in August 1988, they married. The couple honeymooned first class in Jamaica. Returning to Texas, the couple at first moved into an apartment in Garland, close to where Darren worked, learning the computer chip industry, a booming field. Within a year, they relocated to a small home in Rowlett, where Darren started a company, TestNet, that tested circuit boards for computers and operated out of their home, like most startups. I think we have a ton of stories where computer startups started out in the basement, in the garage, at the kitchen table. So very, very usual. Returning to Texas, the couple at first moved into an apartment in Garland, close to where Darren worked, learning the computer chip industry. By 1992, their company had earned them a small fortune. The up-and-coming couple yearned to practice the prestige due them and had a house built in Dalrock Heights Addition, an affluent suburb of Rowlett, adjacent to Lake Ray Hubbard. This community of upper-class businessmen and women bragged crime-free streets and happy families. The 130,000 two-story home of Georgian design resembled a miniature mansion with classic porch, colonial shutters, and a working fountain on the front lawn. Complementing their new life, the family boasted a Jaguar, sitting waxed and gleaming in a circular driveway. A $130,000 two-story home. How many of us right now would push our own neighbor into traffic for a house that would cost $130,000? Don't tell my neighbors, but I would. At least one. Darlie was happy, and she was a very good mother, doting on her 2 children, living to celebrate the good times with them. At Christmas, their house was the most illuminated. At Halloween, their windows displayed more goblins than any other. At Thanksgiving, the Routier's turkey was the largest and most flavorful. On the children's birthdays, Darlie threw gorgeous parties, inviting classmates for an afternoon of frolic in their spacious entertainment center. But there was another side of Darlie, claimed some who knew her, a side that loved to show off and to cover a low self-esteem. She reveled in materialism and impression, often to the point of bizarre. When she decided to get breast implants, she opted for size EE, like the kind of women had in Playboy and Penthouse. When she bought clothes, they were revealing outfits she wore out for a night's dancing just to grab the attention of onlookers. Her wardrobe bill skyrocketed. Can I just back up to size EE? I don't know what her husband's into, but that's a lot. That is a lot of breast for a 5'3" woman. That is a lot of breast for a 6'3" woman. I don't know about the EE. That kind of takes me back a little bit. Darlie's detractors say that her need to be the flashiest, gaudiest eventually overcame everything else in her life, including her children. Neighbors complained that Damon and Devin, not far past the toddler stage, were left unsupervised. And when she did attend to them, she often seemed bothered at having to take the time to do so. Her patience with them decreased. Roots of domestic problems surfaced. Celebrants at a Christmas party slightly watched as Darlie and Darren argued violently when Darlie danced too many times with another man. I never understand why men get upset about that. I could care less. Dance. As long as you're not grabbing and touching, poking, dance. There were rumors of extramarital dating by both partners, but the couple continued to play the surface charade. They bought a 27-foot cabin cruiser and a space at the dock to board it at the exclusive Lake Ray Hubbard Marina. Friends who were aware of their problems were happy when Darlie became pregnant early in 1995. Why would you be happy about that? What kind of idiot? This is 1995, but even in 2022, you still have people who would be dumb enough to think that bringing a baby into a rocky marriage, a rocky relationship, is the way to go. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and will continue to the end of time to be the dumbest thing. They counted on the new baby as the common denominator to renew the couple's love for each other. Again, idiots. They're surrounded by idiots. They're 2 idiots because they stay together, and they're surrounded by about a bunch of idiots. But after Drake was born on October 18th, 1995, the mother suffered postpartum depression, mood swings, drew sudden tempers, and dark rages. Not helping matters was the state of their finances, which, despite good business profits from Tesnick, did not meet the exorbitant lifestyle Darlie and Darren preferred to live and had grown used to. And suddenly, nothing was met. Nothing was being met. Financially, physically, I'm sure, other than having this kid, emotionally. As searched Barbara Davis and Precious Angels. Quote, Tesnick would gross more than $250,000 in 1995. Now, let me stop right there. $250,000, that's not real money. That's no kind of money. I could lose $250,000 at the mall, at Shoe Palace or at Foot Locker. That's not real money. Not even 1995. That is not real money. Almost $12,000 worth of new equipment was purchased for the flourishing business. Their tax return for the year indicated a gross income of $264,000. With a profit range of 40%, the couple netted a little over $100,000. So see, this is what I'm talking about. So we're already at $250,000, at $250,000, which isn't real money. But then you buy what you got to buy for the business. Uncle Sam gets his cut. Now we're at a little over $100,000. How could you ever be happy? At a little over 100, you had no business even having kids, not even in 1995. How you going to feed these children? How you going to clothe these children? Darlie was unable to shed the weight gain she had acquired since her last pregnancy and grew increasingly antagonistic. Well, see, the rest of her body grew into those double E's. She dropped diet pills that didn't work, a fact that when the couple battled, Darren would remind her, knowing he'd hit her tender spot. See, what kind of asshole makes fun of his wife's weight? A lot of things you want to do. That ain't one of them. But that's another sign. Get the hell out of here if you're cutting that deep. Cost-cutting measures ignored, spending sprees accelerating, their financial troubles deepened. The toll on their serenity was excruciating. Tesnick was losing money and Darren was unable to pay himself the salary he required, nor pay Darlie anything at all for doing the books, which she had let go in her depression. Creditors fell upon them, demanding late bills. On Saturday, June 1st, their bank denied them a much-needed loan of $5,000. You in a hurt way, man. Darlie sporadically kept a diary. There were times she would attend to it daily, followed by long, long absences. On May 3rd, 1996, contemplating suicide, she wrote, "Devin, Damon, and Drake, I hope you will forgive me for what I am about to do. My life has been such a hard fight for a long time, and I just can't find the strength to keep fighting anymore. I love you three more than anything else in this world, and I want all three of you to be healthy and happy, and I don't want you to see a miserable person every time you look at me." Darren walked in on her while she was writing and noticed the tears swelling in her eyes. She broke down and confessed the terrible thoughts of suicide that had been running hot through her brain. He held her and they talked long into the afternoon. By the end of the conversation, she had calmed. For one afternoon, they loved each other again. A month later, something snapped and flushed up hell. Before I go on, let me back something up here. You guys know I like to share a little parts of myself every once in a while if I find somewhere where it fits. We already discussed that this woman cried rape to get attention. We already discussed that this woman was upset at a party, the same party, because she wasn't getting attention. Here we go all these years later, and now she's, for air quotes here for people who can't see me, I'm using air quotes, she's going to commit suicide? I bet anything that this woman was sitting somewhere waiting for this man to get within earshot or to hear some footsteps coming so that she could pass this off as if she was actually going to kill herself. There's no way this was getting ready to happen. No way. But I can't fault them for it because I myself fell for some nonsense like this many, many years ago with a girl who wanted some attention and wanted me to come home. I'm originally from Detroit, went downtown to see the Lions game, having a great time with my buddy. She wanted me to come home sooner. I didn't want to because I got away from you finally. I just want to be out. I come home. She's laid across the bed. There are pills. There's a pill bottle. I mean, picture the craziest shit that you think you could think of someone faking a suicide. And I think I'm topping it with this. She's laid across the bed at an angle with her head just dangling back off the edge of the bed, arms flailed off to the side, pill bottle just barely in her hand, and pills on the floor. And because I was young and dumb and not having the wisdom and having the experience under my belt now, I did not, like if I'd have read this then all those years ago, I'd have thought, man, that was crazy. I can't believe she was going to kill herself. Thank God he walked in. But because I am a grizzled veteran now, I see bullshit when I see bullshit. And I wish this guy could have seen it at the time. And I wish I could have seen that bullshit for myself at the time, to be honest with you. So a month later, something snapped and flushed up hell. So in June 6, 1996, dawn had not yet arrived over the posh neighborhood of Dog Rock Heights Addition near Raleigh, Texas. And in the bird's eye view, the usually safe and coddled environment of the upper class community looked peaceful and tranquil before the new day. But at 5801 Eagle Drive, evil rampaged. The first outsider to hear of the troubles raging within was Doris Trammell, night dispatcher for the Raleigh Police Department. She was surprised when the emergency phone rang at 2:31 a.m. Troubles were few there. for it was the kind of community known as a safe haven for the rest of the world, a place to raise a family, but her nonchalance was jolted. A hysterical female voice at the other end of the line was telling a terrible story. The voice screamed, "Somebody broke into our house. They just stabbed me and my children." Trammell was shocked, shot right up in her chair, captured her senses, and then tried to calm the woman, tried to get the details in as orderly manner as possible. But the caller continued to scream, panic-stricken into the mouthpiece for her home. "My little boys are dying. Oh my God, my babies are dying." Trammell's fingers scrambled for her and punched the main police unit line. She side-mouthed into the microphone, "Stand by for medical emergency. Woman and children stabbed." Then advised the woman at the other end to hold on while she summoned an ambulance. But the woman continued to sob and yelp without hesitation. "My babies are dying. My babies are dying." "Ma'am, please calm down. Tell me what's happened," the dispatcher begged. But the woman was incoherent, and Trammell grew more confounded. Drawing up her computer screen, she traced the call back to its caller ID to a number belonging to a Darren and Darlie Routier at 5801 Eagle Drive. After several more pleas, Trammell convinced the party at the other end to subdue, to take a deep breath, to explain what was happening over there. The dispatcher still could not believe what she was hearing. Murder in peaceful Rowlett? Darlie Routier, the caller, spurted, sobbed, gasped, and moaned, a terrible tale unheard of in the up until then placid suburb. "While I was sleeping, me and my little boys were sleeping downstairs. Someone came in, stabbed my babies, stabbed me. I woke up. I was fighting. He ran out through the garage, threw the knife down." Now I know what you guys are thinking. Bullshit. "How old are your boys?" Trammell pursued, and learned that the injured children were 6 and 5. Devin and Damon were their names. In the meantime, a squad had detected the emergency vehicle wired by Trammell and reported to the dispatcher it was on its way to the Routier address. 28-year-old Darren Routier had been awakened from sleep upstairs by his wife, Darlie's screams, and now rushed downstairs into the family's entertainment room. Before he had gone to bed hours earlier, the last he had seen of that den was a domestic scene. His children lying on the floor watching their big screen television, and Darlie lying on the sofa near them, looking sexy in her Victoria's Secret nightshirt. Now his two boys, Devin and Damon, lay blood-soaked while Darlie, her nightshirt covered in blood, paced in a panic, shouting at the police dispatcher into the portable phone. Now, Barbara Davis, in her book, Precious Angels, she has here, quote, "He saw blood everywhere. Darren rushed to Devin's side and saw 2 huge gashes in his son's chest where the 6-year-old had been stabbed repeatedly. Checking for a pulse and feeling none, he looked at Devin's face, eyes wide open, stared vacantly back. He then turned towards the other boy, 5-year-old Damon, lying near a wall, his back to the room. A small amount of blood was oozing through the back of his shorts," writes Davis. Damon's lungs rattled as he struggled to suck in air. We always say that no parent should ever outlive their child. And it's true. No parent should never bury their child. It's true. You know, we just had the mass shooting in Texas a couple of weeks ago, which was an emotional thing for this entire country, including myself. I talked about it on my other podcast, Not As Debatable, and it was a rough conversation to have. And stories like these are always rough for me. And I'm not an overly emotional person. I'm not an overly some people will say that, I'll put it this way, some people will say I lack empathy, but stories like this kind of pull me back a little bit. Because when I read that a small boy was laying on his back, struggling to suck in air, I don't know, man. I don't know. Torn between two sons, the horrified father momentarily panicked, then made the decision to begin cardiopulmonary resuscitation on the son who was not breathing. Darren placed his hand over Devin's nose and breathed into his child's mouth. Blood sprayed back onto the father's face. Policeman David Waddell was the first officer to arrive on the scene. He could not believe what he saw. Had he never seen anything like this as a lawman in that town? He sickened at the sight and the overwhelming smell of blood. Breathing deeply to contain his senses, the officer quickly surveyed the two children. One appeared dead, the other with but a hint of a pulse, and instructed Darlie to lay towels across Damon and apply pressure to his wounds. She ignored him, which he thought strange, even in her frantic state, but only continued to scream at the officer that the intruder might still be in the garage where he had fled. Waddell was soon joined by another policeman, Sergeant Matthew Walling, and by a paramedic team of Jack Colby and Brian Koshik. Like Waddell, they paused at the death. The paramedics immediately realized that they couldn't handle this carnage alone. Two children dead and dying, and an adult woman soaked in blood. A bloody rag pressed to her throat and radioed for backup. They pressed a bloody rag. Aside, Waddell briefed his sergeant. Together they followed the path of blood through the house, from the entertainment room to the attached garage, accessible through the kitchen and a small utility room out back. Throwing their beam into the darkness of the garage until they found the light switch, they moved forward, revolvers drawn. They encountered no stranger. However, they noticed that the screen on the side of the window of the garage had been visibly slashed down its center. Realizing the attacker might still be in the house, the policeman checked out every room upstairs and down, every nook, closet, and cranny in the house. Pausing now to take in the state of the kitchen, through which the killer was set to flee, noted its disarray, its tiled floor splattered by blood, a vacuum cleaner knocked over as if in tumult, and most ominous, a bloody butcher knife resting silent now atop the island countertop. Beside the blade curiously lay a woman's latched purse and a set of women's expensive-looking jewelry, strangely untouched. Strangely is right. Upstairs, they came across a third child, an infant, whimpering in its crib. Gently lifting the baby boy, Sergeant Walling examined him for bruises, but found none. Darlie Routier, who met them below the steps, explained the child was their youngest, Drake, 6 months old. The pair of paramedics had, in the meantime, been joined by three others, Larry Byford, Eric Zimmerman, and Rick Coleman. It had already become terribly clear that Damon was still alive, albeit barely, but that his brother Devin had died. The latter's eyes stared lifeless to the ceiling. Coleman had hastily assembled an IV tube to hopefully sustain the dying until they reached the hospital. Assessing both boys' wounds, the medics noted two particularly large gashes, identifiably knife thrusts in each of their chests. The thrust had penetrated the children's lungs. Devin had died gasping, a horrible death. Damon's lungs, too, strained for oxygen, undeniably suffering the same fate that had claimed his sibling. Colby scooped Damon in his arms and maneuvered to the stretcher. He thought he heard the boy's death rattle, sounding as though his lungs expelled what little air they contained. With the assistance of Coleman, Colby performed chest compressions to keep the boy alive. Wheeling him to the curbside ambulance, he simultaneously sluiced air to the trachea that the boy might receive precious air. The medics continued offering life-saving maneuvers the entire way to Baylor Medical Center across town, but the child died before they reached it. In the meantime, the K-9 unit had arrived on Eagle Drive, its animals unmuzzled and scent sniffing. Officer Waddle briefed its commander on the case and joined the team for a search of the neighborhood roundabout. This while Sergeant Walling managed to calm the frantic Mrs. Routier on the front porch. While they gauzed her bleeding, they told the sergeant what she had told Waddell earlier, that an intruder had entered her home and mounted her on the sofa while she slept. She had awakened to him, screamed, and after struggling with him, warding off his blows, he absconded toward the garage. It was then she noticed that he had left behind her 2 butchered boys. Of his attack on them, she had heard nothing. She halted and grimaced as paramedics Koshik and Byford applied an IV line into her arm, then paused again as they placed steri-strips across a shallow but ugly throat cut. Recuperating from the smarting applications, she continued to speak to the policeman. She described her attacker as a man of medium to tall height, dressed entirely in black, t-shirt, jeans, and baseball cap. 3 o'clock in the morning, and Welling had concluded his interview. He stepped aside as the paramedics escorted her to the ambulance. She required further medical aid at Baylor Center. Darren told her he would follow, much too shaken to drive. He called on neighbor Tom Neal to drive him. Neal's wife remained behind to babysit infant Drake. The Routiers were on their way to the hospital, but the police remained at their premises. In fact, their ranks grew in number. Squads drew up as an army, their rolling flashes severing the darkness to rudely lighten the cul-de-sac where the Routiers lived. Neighbors, roused from their beds, emerged from their dark homes to their assorted yards to gape as troops of dark uniforms flanked in marching fashion around and through the Routier house, across its lawn, through its colonial-style front door, under the glare of the torch. Police threw up a cordon around the property. The staring citizens had never expected to see anything like this in Rowlett, here in the crime-free suburb of Dog Rock Heights Addition, especially on their own street. Because of its severity, the crime scene drew Rowlett's law enforcement honchos. Among them were Lieutenant Grant Jack. That sounds like a cop's name, doesn't it? Grant Jack, commander of the investigative division. Summoned from his bed, he arrived shortly after 3 a.m. and viewed the battle-hardened appearance of Eagle Drive. In the foyer of 5801, he met Detective Jimmy Patterson, a veteran of Crimes Against Persons Division, who pointed out to Routier's child, Devin, still lying under a blanket. He explained what he knew up to this time concerning the slayings that the mother claimed the stranger had committed the atrocities and the butcher knife. Back up there. He explained what he knew up to this time concerning the slayings that the mother claimed a stranger had committed with a butcher knife. And the butcher knife lay where the police found it, on the kitchenette counter, bloodied. The mother, said Patterson, had put it there after lifting it off the floor after the killer dropped it. As the 2 professionals conferred, their forces uniformed and in plain clothes, steamrolled through the home's many rooms, looking for suspicious objects and possible clues. Ascending the Routier's circular staircase to the 2nd floor, a couple of them were accosted by a yapping white Pomeranian. The animal nipped at one of the patrolman's trouser legs. Karen Neal, on hand, rushed to the rescue. It's Karen, Domain, Karen. Now leave the policeman alone and get in your corner, she scolded. Corralling Domain, she apologized to the police, explained that the dog was adverse to strangers, the patrolman, and probably Karen Neal, too. Wondered where this watchdog had been during the all-important time of break-in. See, just another clue of this is complete nonsense. Lieutenant Jack, a professional in the law enforcement field for more than 20 years, had never witnessed slaughter like this in such a peaceful suburban community. It left him pondering the creature that caused this, that walked on 2 feet and called itself a human. And when the morgue attendants zipped what was left of little Devin into the standard black plastic body bag, the officer, who considered himself a pretty tough person, turned his face away to bawl like a baby. But it wasn't just the physicality that gnawed at Jack. It was something else. Something deep under that warned his psyche. Something doesn't add up here. Patterson felt it too, and admitted it. A strong sense of macabre crept into their bones. Jack put Patterson on his partner. Chris Frosch, in charge of the investigation. He sent him to the hospital, in fact, to interview Mrs. Routier at first chance. He needed to get as much detailed information as he could about what happened in his house to cause such bloodletting and havoc. So far, too many blanks existed and too many suspicions. Maybe wayward, maybe premature. Eagle Drive had become a rush. Media crews had assembled, and cameras flashed in the darkness, catching police activity. Away from the ears of the cameraman, Sergeant Walling drew his superior into his confidence. He looked stunned. "Lieutenant, you won't believe what Mr. Routier said to me right before he left to go to the hospital with his wife. He turned to me, and I swear to God, he said, 'Golly, I guess this is the biggest thing Rowlett's ever had. The man had 2 of his children slaughtered tonight, and he's acting like the damn circus is in town.'" No, Jack thought to himself. Things didn't add up. The Routier home buzzed with stark-faced policemen, taking stark notes, shooting stark crime photos, dusting for fingerprints that would tell a stark tale. In the kitchenette, something very telling had occurred. Sergeant Neighbors thought it was strange that the sink was spotless and white, while the floors and edges of the countertop around and above it was blood smudged. And if someone had taken the effort to clean the sink of blood, why? His job being to process blood traces at a crime scene, Neighbors went to work. He conducted a test to detect the presence of human blood that cannot be seen with the naked eye. And I think we've all seen that test done before, whether you watch 48 Hours or you watch CSI or whatever, Law and Order. I think we've all seen it. Where they come in and they spray the luminol and they turn off the lights and boom, the whole room lights up. So he did that. He repeated the process on the leatherette sofa. The detective found a small child's handprint, glowing iridescent blue, near the edge where Damon had been stabbed. Like the blood in the kitchen, someone had wiped it away. Again, why? Simultaneously to Neighbors' findings, crime scene consultant James Cron found other variables of the case out of sync. Like Sergeant Neighbors, he realized what appeared to be wasn't. The moment he arrived at the home, his years of experience told him as he began taking mental notes that Darlie Routier's testimony of what happened didn't. Mrs. Routier had stated she believed the killer had gotten in and escaped through the garage. Indeed, Cron found, as the woman said, a slit screen on the side of the house in the garage, but he knew at first glance it was a no-go. The screen showed no signs of having been forcibly pushed in or out to allow a body through its netting. But even more telling was the fact that the screen's frame was easily removable. Any criminal with an idiot's IQ would have simply taken it off its setting. Additionally, the ground below the window, comprised of dewy, wet mulch, was undisturbed. Perhaps he figured the woman in her panic condition may have been wrong. Perhaps the intruder had found other ingress and egress. So he rounded the entire home for other visible indications of breaking and entry. He found none. Returning inside, he followed the bloody footprints. They indeed led from the room where the children were slain through to a utility room, then onto the concrete floor of the garage, trailing off below its window. But again, the screen seemed an unlikely escape port. Doubling that suspicion, the dust on the sill was undisturbed. There were no handprints, bloody or otherwise. Around the window, odd, since the killer forcing his way through the window would have had to hang onto the walls for balance. So he double-tracked back through the yard, this time looking for drops of blood left behind by the slayer in flight. And I think we kind of all get a gist of where this might be going. Surely his savagery had produced vast amounts of blood, and his clothing would have been dripping with it. Yet there were no apparent traces beyond the interior of the house. Not on the mulch below the window, not on the yard's manicured lawn, not along nor atop the 6-foot-high fence that surrounded the yard, not in the alley. The blood was contained within the house. Weird when a guy who's slaughtered 2 children runs out and there's no blood droplets going through the yard. The lampshade was askew, and an expensive flower arrangement lay beside the coffee table. Nothing more out of place. He found, in fact, the fragile stems of the flowers unbroken, as if the arrangement had fallen. Excuse me. The fragile stems of the flowers unbroken, as if the arrangement hadn't fallen, but had been placed there. In the kitchenette, only Darlie's bloody footprints were visible. Pieces of a shattered wine glass, too, lay among the footprints. And a vacuum cleaner had been deposited on its side. Blood underneath these stems indicated to him that they were dropped after, not before, nor during the violence. Atop the kitchen counter sat Darlie's purse, which appeared in order and undisturbed, and several pieces of jewelry, rings, a bracelet, and a watch aligned in order, untouched. Late afternoon, after his thorough and all-day examination, there was a summary. We all know the crime scene tells the story. Problem is, he nodded, that story is not the same one the mother's telling. Somebody inside this house did this thing. Gentlemen, there was no intruder. Months later in court, the prosecution would attempt to demonstrate Darlie Routier as a heartless, cold-blooded killer. Much of their testimony came from the staff of Baylor Medical Center, where the dead boys were delivered and where Darlie Routier was admitted for observation. Almost immediately, the hospital's personnel sensed something amiss with the mother. For while she outwardly seemed agitated by her tragedy, repeating over and over, "Who could have done this to my boys?" her reaction struck them as insincere and artificial. Trauma nurse Jody Fitz, an RN for 8 years, recalls Darlie was wheeled by Trauma 1, where her dead child was. She glanced over there, and I was very concerned she would get more upset. His physical condition alone was disconcerting. He was nude and covered head to toe in blood. Tubes were still held in place with tape, and brown bags had been placed around his little bitty hands to preserve any possible evidence. It was a very stressful and horrible sight. I'll never forget it. Darlie saw him. She had absolutely no response, just turned her head back and stared straight ahead, as cold as ice. Checking the woman's condition, examining Drs. Santos and DeLon found the mother's wound superficial. Under the scratches and blood, they uncovered some minor cuts, which they stitched, and a gash on the throat. While the latter left a sickening sight, it was not dangerous, they asserted. Santos nevertheless made the decision to keep her in check for several days, considering the strain of the ordeal she suffered. She was birthed in the intensive care unit under supervision and hooked up to the procedural heart monitor and oxygen tank. On Thursday, the day after the murders, Darlie was again interviewed by the police, this time by detectives Jimmy Patterson and Chris Fosh. She reiterated her story of the attack. Her description was slightly more detailed than before. I woke up hearing my son Damon saying, "Mommy, Mommy," as he tugged on my nightshirt. I opened my eyes and felt the man get off me. I got up to chase after him. As I flipped the light in the kitchen on, I saw him open his hand and let the knife drop to the floor. Then he ran out the garage. I went over and picked up the knife. I shouldn't have picked it up. I probably covered up the fingerprints. I shouldn't have picked it up. What a strange thing to say. Just the wording. I probably covered the fingerprints. She's 5'3". She's gained some weight, but she's still 5'3". She started out as 5'3". And I didn't read in here any description of 5'3" with huge man hands. What a strange thing to say, that your fingerprints, your handprints, will cover the handprints and the fingerprints of a grown man. I looked over and saw my 2 babies with blood all over them. I didn't realize my own throat had been cut until I saw myself in the mirror. I screamed out to my husband. A male nurse named Christopher was on hand during the interview. He noted how she continuously seemed to admonish herself, even to other hospital personnel before and after the interview, for picking up the murder weapon and erasing the intruder's fingerprints. It seemed as if she wanted the point driven home but her fingerprints were on that knife. Various other staff members who attended to Darlie throughout her short stay at the Baylor complained that she seemed far removed from despair, even cold to the situation. Paige Campbell's remarks echo many others. People react differently, but there is a commonality when someone sees someone they love die. But I had never seen a reaction like Darlie's before. There were tissues by the bed, but she never took one. Now, I don't know a mother out there. Something happened to the child, that would be the case. Not my mother, not any friends' mothers, not my wife's mother. And to be killed at such a young age, in such a manner, and not to be crying, not to be emotional the entire time. Denise Falk, a nurse who attended to Darlie during her first night in ICU, was so bothered by Darlie's nonchalance that she went home after her tour of duty and recorded her observations on the woman's behavior. Responsible for washing the blood off Darlie's feet, she expected the woman to break down, but she noted the mother had displayed complete indifference. Dr. Santos released his patient on Saturday morning so she could attend her son's wake that evening at Rest Haven Funeral Home. Detectives Patterson and Frosch, however, first escorted Darlie and her husband Darren to the station house for statements. Procedurally, given the Miranda rights, Darlie wrote her official statement, which recalled the events of the preceding Wednesday morning. In this version, she penned that she was awakened by Damon, who was still standing on his feet when he uttered, "Mommy, Mommy." This is the third version of this story. And it is changing, not slightly. These are dramatic changes. Now the little boy's on his feet. In the anteroom, Patterson explained to Lieutenant Jack something he had caught in his latest conversation with Mrs. Routier while she was still bedridden, when he had mentioned to her that her dog when her dog Domain had tried to bite a patrolman. She fleetingly remarked, "Oh, he always goes off like that when someone he doesn't know walks in the door." Jack gave him, "I hope you made a note of that expression," in return. Family and friends, neighbors turned out that Saturday evening at the funeral parlor. The boys were suited in tiny tuxedos and separate walnut caskets enveloped by roses of red and white. The tuxedos, I'm sorry, folks, the tuxedos kind of threw me off a little bit. I don't think I've ever seen that, anyone in that type of attire, but, to each his own. Upon entering the chapel, Darlie knelt at their sides and whispered to them. Detective Frosch overheard it. "I'm sorry." She then wailed, "Who could have done this to my children?" After Darren calmed her down, mourners strode forward to express their condolences. One mourner, Helena Casaban, who sometimes performed general housekeeping duties for the Routiers, was thrown off balance by her employer's remarks. When she told Darlie how sorry she was for the tragedy, adding, "And now this expensive funeral to add to your problems?" Darlie replied, "I'm not worried. I'll get $5,000 each for both of the boys." During the hour-long service the next day, "She didn't wipe her eyes," exclaimed a relative. "Never cried. There is no mistaking grief." Now, according to Barbara Davis again in her book, Precious Angels, as the families tried to comfort Darren, Darlie busied herself by looking at the names on the flower arrangements and comforting her relatives. The family would try to excuse Darlie's lack of emotion by blaming the pills, Xanax, they had her on Xanax, the doctor had prescribed. As the family wept before the boys' coffins, Darlie made the comment that she had to be sure to send thank you notes to all of those who sent flowers. After all, it was the proper thing to do, quote unquote. This woman is murderous. She's so strange. And I could only assume that there was pieces of this being displayed throughout her life. And it just all kind of came to a culmination on the night where she murdered her sons. The story's not done, but if I have her here as this week's story, I guess I'm sure you get the gist of that's what I believe happened. Darlie Routier had not yet returned to her home on Eagle Drive since that horrible morning. She, Darren, and baby Drake had been staying with Mama Darlie in Plano. Needing some articles of clothing, she telephoned her friend Mercedes Adams a few days after the funeral to ask if she would mind driving her there. Mercedes complied, but expected Darlie to buckle under upon walking into the place that took the lives of her two sons. The girlfriend was in for an awakening. Death lingered in the foyer. But Darlie, Mercedes noted, charged onto the scene, seemingly unaware, and like a bull elephant, arms akimbo, shouted, "Look at this mess. It'll cost us a fortune to fix this shit." Right there where her boys were killed, and that's the first thing she said to me. I put my hands on Darlie's shoulders and said, "Darlie, look me in the eye and tell me you didn't kill the boys." She looked me in the eye and said, "I'm going to get new carpet, new drapes, and fix this room all up." I couldn't believe it. Back at the Rowlett police station, questions loomed. Among them, 1, what was the motive for the murders? 2, if a robbery, why was Darlie's jewelry and purse left untouched? 3, why would an intruder kill 2 children before dispatching the adult who posed a more serious threat? 4, why would the killer, who obviously had no scruples about murdering a pair of small boys, back off when Darlie awoke, leaving a witness alive to identify him? 5, why would he drop the murder weapon on the floor, giving Darlie, his pursuer, a weapon in which to fight back? 6, why would he have used Routier's butcher knife in the first place? For me, that is number 1. How do you get in? With what knife did you cut the screen with? And then you needed to use their knife in order to commit the murders. 7, why were there no visible signs of an intruder? Footprints, handprints, drops of blood beyond the house where he made his escape. And as questions mounted, it appeared that a bread knife owned by the Routiers might have been used to cut the garage screen. So 2 knives? Both of them from the house? So this, of course, brought on more questions. 8, had the intruder used the Routier's bread knife to slash his way in? And number 9, if so, how did he get the knife in the first place? Again, should have been at the top. Detective Jimmy Patterson conferred with Dr. Townsend Parchment, who had photographed Darlie's wounds allegedly received by the phantom intruder. While her boys were maliciously and forcefully attacked, her wounds were surface and bore trademarks of what doctors call hesitation wounds. That is, the wounds indicated that the blade had slowly, deliberately cut into her skin, and when pain was encountered, the person holding the blade reflexively withdrew it. The police had turned to the FBI Center for Analysis of Violent Crime in Quantico, Virginia, to evaluate and compare the wounds of the dead boys to those of Darlie. The FBI's Al Brantley, after studying the doctors' and coroner's reports as well as the crime findings in general, attested that the wounds between sons and mother were indeed vastly different. Darlie superficial, Damon's and Devin's massive and mortal. The attack on the children were personal, said Brantley. The killer focused on their chest, he emphasized, almost as if going for their heart. That indicates extreme anger toward them. Brantley reported other observations. For a violent struggle to take place as the mother claimed, no real breakage occurred. After looking at the crime scene photographs, it appeared to me that the intruder who committed this crime had a strong connection to the material items in the home. Let's not forget, again, let's go back, folks. Let's not forget how materialistic she and her husband are. Not to say I'm throwing him in the mix, but they're both materialistic. And then we go ahead and we fast forward just a little bit behind these statements here to what's the first thing that she thinks about? What's the first thing that she says when she walks into the home with her friend Mercedes? The living room was fairly small and compressed. 2 adults fighting would have resulted in a lot more broken things. A lot of fragile items in the living room that should have taken the brunt of a struggle were not broken. His conclusion, Damon's and Devin Slayer was someone who knew them and knew the premises. The entire scenario had been planned in advance and staged. The most bizarre of the post-murder episodes was yet to take place in what became the state's case against Darlie Routier. It was a birthday party eerily held graveside to celebrate Devon's 7th birthday. They're celebrating this child's birthday after he died. I've never heard of such a thing. Darlie and Darren, that's Routier, infant Drake, and Darlie's mother, 16-year-old sister Dana, who still lived at home with the elder Mama Darlie, and a few invited personal friends were the celebrants. Local television station KXAS-TV was on hand to record the strange event. Darlie told Joe Munoz, a reporter, that the family had planned a whopping birthday prior to her son's death, and that she saw no reason now why he should have to be deprived of it. Excuse me. She saw no reason why he should have to be deprived of it. I'm so used to this woman thinking about herself, I wanted to say she should, but it's he should be deprived of it. To many of the NBC crew on hand at Rest Haven Memorial Park that morning of June 14th, it seemed like one of three things: either a bad PR attempt of Darlie's, a sincere but naive show of goodwill done in poor taste, or simple, plain, unmitigated lunacy. I'm going with three. Neither of the Routiers or the TV crew were aware that investigators were recording the party from a concealed camcorder. Thank God, at least they got that right. I mean, how long are we going to take here to get this woman? Now, Americans have been horrified at the destruction of these two little boys' lives, and now, with the news that their mother might be their murderer, they were stunned. Film crews and network anchors descended like locusts on the town. Darlie remained under custody of the Lou Starrett Justice Center, awaiting indictment. A Dallas County grand jury officially indicted her on June 28th on 2 counts of capital murder. That same day, Judge Mark Toll, who would preside at her trial, issued a gag warrant that barred both the defense and prosecution from discussing the case in the media. This, of course, eliminated any of the direct players' participation on TV talk and radio shows. Doug Parks, Darlie's court-appointed lawyer, presented a request to Judge Toll on July 9th, recommending that the trial be moved out of Dallas County, where he claimed bad publicity would prejudice jury members. The motion went into consideration, and before the trial would open on a scheduled date in January 1997, it would indeed be moved to the town of Kerrville in neighboring Bexar County. Because no one's going to hear about this? Park's move was well orchestrated since, 4 days after, state prosecutor Greg Davis announced in a dramatic fashion that he would seek the death penalty. While such seemed unlikely, the last woman to be executed in Texas was during the Civil War. Young but brilliant Davis had a knack for getting what he went after. Assisting him would be 2 rising prosecution attorneys, Sherry Wallace and Toby Shook. Immediately after her incarceration, Darlie had demanded that she be given a polygraph test, which the police agreed to administer. When she was informed that her husband Darren could not be present in the room during the test, she withdrew her request. However, she again changed her mind on advice from her defense team, but with the stipulation that before she take the polygraph, she exercised her right to take a private test first. The results of that test were never formally released, but Darlie and her mother were seen immediately afterwards, sobbing relentlessly. After the prosecution announced his death pursuit, the Routier-in-laws hurriedly dropped the state-supplied lawyer assigned to Darlie, and knowing they needed big guns to fight back, mortgaged their homes to procure the services of a headline defense attorney, Doug Mulder, late of the district's attorney's office. To counteract the legal backup talent pressed against his client, he assembled a grade A team, which included a retired FBI investigator. I always think about what lawyer would take a case like this, but as they say, everyone deserves an opportunity to defend themselves. My problem, again, goes back to the people who were surrounding these people. What people would put their homes up to help you get an attorney in a case like this? You couldn't talk me into it. You couldn't get me to believe anything else. Jury selection began October 6th of 1996 in Kerrville. The process would take 2 days short of a month. Because of the media frenzy, is Darlie guilty or isn't she? Unfounded truths and rumors were flying amidst the tabloids and even major newspapers. Lawyers from both sides wanted to ensure that they selected a jury worthy of the impartiality that a body of jurors was supposed to comprise. I'm laughing because where did you think those people were going to be? On November 14th, they announced that they completed this. 7 women and 5 men would be the final deciders of Darlie Routier's case after what promised to be a trial of high suspense. Darren Routier, Mama Darlie, and other family supporters took lodging in local hotels where they would remain near the accused throughout the trial. Over his head in the bills, Darren had by this time deserted the now dreaded family home in Direct Heights Addition, transferring all personal possessions into storage. He let the mortgage payments lapse, and in mid-December, the mortgage company repossessed the property 6 months in arrears. It was claimed that at the time of the foreclosure, the only reminder of the Routiers' lives, there was a pair of little boys' gym shoes left abandoned on the front porch. Eyes and ears of the world were on Kerrville, Texas. A test Barbara Davis. The district attorney's office, being relentless, had decided to concentrate its initial armament against Darlie on the death of only one of her boys, Damon, holding the capital murder indictment on Devin's death in limbo. They could use it as a second-line support should the woman be acquitted or receive a life sentence. I do like that. And I'm sure it's not the first time it's been done, but it's the first time I've ever heard of it being done, where you have 2 individuals who were killed, in this case, 2 small boys, and you only take who you believe who have killed them to trial on one, just in case something happens, whether they get acquitted or, as it says here, just receives a life sentence, because you want that death penalty. When the indictment was recited, first-degree murder in the death of Damon Christian Routier, Darlie stood facing the judge, shouldered by her lawyer, Doug Mulder. She pleaded not guilty. Chief Prosecutor Greg Davis' opening remarks stunned her. The evidence will show you, ladies and gentlemen, that Darlie Routier is a self-centered, materialistic woman cold enough to murder 2 precious children. He vowed to prove how the facts of the case, as found by experts, did not match the mother's explanation of what happened in her home the night of the brutal killings. Defense attorney Mulder, in turn, painted Darlie as a caring mother who, like any other housewife, suffered personal problems and concerns. She was, he said, caught up in a maelstrom of fate. And the state wants you to believe she became a psychotic killer in the blink of an eye? He asked. Well, folks, that's just absurd. The trial would last nearly a month. Proceedings began with the introduction of the first witness of the state, Dr. Joni McLean, from the medical examiner's office. Dr. McLean explained the doctor. I am so jumbled today. Sorry, folks. I apologize. The trial would last nearly a month. Proceedings began with the introduction of the first witness for the state, Dr. Joni McLean, from the medical examiner's office. Dr. McLean explained the 2 defense wounds on Damon's body, indicating that he had struggled with his attacker before dying. Coroner Janice Townsend Parchman described the differences between the children's savage wounds and Darlie's hesitation wounds, suggesting that Darlie inflicted herself with these wounds. Officer Waddell, the first policeman on the scene the morning of June 6, testified to the carnage that confronted him inside the Routier house when he entered. Jury members were shown crime scene photographs which detailed the aftermath of the violence. Following this dramatic play, paramedic Jacoby related heart-tugging testimony of tending to little Damon and watching. Despite any given life-saving measurements, the boy's final struggle for air through bloody lungs. The first week's witness presentations ended on a very negative note for Darlie Lynn Routier. Following Kobe's vivid story, fellow paramedic Larry Byford, who examined her in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, claimed that during the entire trip, she didn't ask once about the condition of her children. Not once. Over the next couple of weeks, verbal shrapnel continued to tear the accused apart, word by word, despite the defense's attempts for cover. Kicking off their second week of the prosecution's assault were two members of Rowlett Police Force, Officer David Maines, who discussed some of the evidence uncovered from the crime scene, including a section of white carpeting bearing Damon's bloody handprint, and a fingerprint expert, Charles Hamilton, who basically told the jury that the only prints uncovered at the scene were Darlie's and her two children's. Investigator James Crone next detailed his search of a possible pursuer's flight through the Routier home. Through the utility hall and garage, a very careful and scientifically based trek that failed to turn up clues of there ever have being an intruder. Summarizing, he said, "After my initial walkthrough, I thought someone in the family had committed the murders and staged the scene. The further I got into my investigation, the more convinced I became." Charles Lynch, a trace evidence expert, took the stand. Lynch, an analyst for the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences, supported Crone's claims. "It was impossible," said he, "for an intruder to have left the scene of the crime without leaving a trail of blood." Hammering this point home for the benefit of the court, the prosecution next delivered blood expert Tom Bevel, who professionally illustrated the velocity and direction of the blood found on Darlie's nightshirt. His finding was that her son's blood found on the nightshirt had been literally sprayed onto it while she was in the act of various upswing motions, in other words, stabbing, slicing gestures. The state's final witness after weeks of hard hitters was the hardest hitter of all, the FBI Special Agent Al Brantley. He first listed the reasons why he disregarded an intruder among them: that the screen would not have been cut, but removed; that the positioning of the Routier house on a cul-de-sac with a high fence would have discouraged the burglar or rapist. He addressed motive. Had a thief called, Darlie's jewelry, which was in the open and very visible, would have been taken. And as for attempted rape, as Darlie had suggested, sexual offenders assailing a woman would not have killed her children but used them as leverage to get her to submit. And discussing the savagery expended on the young victims, he theorized that the attack was personal and done in extreme anger. Brantley concluded someone who knew those children very well murdered them. By the time the defense opened its arguments, the case looked unsalvageable for its client. But Doug Mulder and his team did the best with what they had to contradict and counteract the gallows material planted by prosecutor Greg Davis. Leading the defense's string of witnesses were friends, neighbors, and relatives who had known Darlie for years and who vouched for her character. Reverend David Rogers, who officiated at the funeral, thought Darlie was grieving appropriately. Friend Kara Byford spoke of Darlie's kindness and of how Darlie came to her after the murders of Consolation, since Kara had lost four-month-old boy years previously. Next-door neighbor Karen Neal saw Darlie's grief as real and not at all artificial, as the prosecution tried to plant. Husband Darren Routier's presence in the witness box brought attention as he admitted to family problems due to financial woes, but attested that his wife was truly devastated by their boy's death. He choked back tears when he recalled the morning of the murder and his administration of CPR to Damon. Darlie was running back and forth, getting wet towels, going, oh my God, he's dead. I blew 2 or 3 times. She was over him trying to hold the gaps in his chest together. I knew he was dead in 3 minutes. I screamed at Officer Waddell, and Darlie tried to get him to go to the garage. All 3 of us were in shock. A major impact in the prosecution's case had been the hesitation wounds on Darlie's throat. But Bexar County's medical examiner, Dr. Vincent DeMaio, a professor of forensic pathology, tried to lay doubt that the woman's wounds were self-inflicted and surface. Her throat slash, he claimed, had come within 2 millimeters of the carotid artery. 2 millimeters of the carotid artery. As well, he diagnosed bruises on her arms as mass trauma coming from a blunt instrument and not self-given. Since the prosecution had made much of Darlie's contradictory testimony before and after her arrest, Attorney Mulder needed a reliable witness to express in medical terms how a suspect, having faced psychological trauma, often lapses in and out of memory. He found that witnesses and forensic psychologist Dr. Lisa Clayton, the expert, had done much work on the homicidal mind. The doctor had interviewed Darlie and believed her to be innocent, stating that she showed the typical blackout and distorted memory symptoms of people who lived through a trauma and were forced to give a clear description of their encounter. The final witness for the defense on January 29th was a surprise, and it turned out for the defense itself a bad move. The accused, Darlie Routier. Mulder had tried to talk his client out of appearing, insisting that she would pit herself against cross-examination by a ruthless prosecution team that could make mincemeat out of anything she said, but Darlie persisted. And this is going, again, to repeat myself, back to the beginning. I have no idea why this woman killed her children, but I do know she was not going to miss out on the opportunity to be in this spotlight. The moment started off well as Mulder guided her through her life story, her dedicated motherhood to 3 children, her domestic ups and downs. He had her skillfully read excerpts from her diary that penetrated the shell of what the prosecution called a wicked woman to display a thoughtful, sometimes deep person who recognized and cherished life's values. She explained that the silly string used at the graveside during Devin's posthumous birthday party was brought by her younger sister, Dana, not her, as a symbol of the fun the little boys would have liked to have had they been alive. She remembered the night of the murder, emphasizing that if her story changed slightly, it was because she simply could not remember things clearly. The shock had left her jumbled. But when the defense stepped aside, the prosecution wilted her in the face of her own statements. They badgered and barked and condemned her. They wouldn't accept amnesia. They wouldn't accept alibi. They wouldn't accept a word she told them and drove into her with an inquisition. They asked about why she told one policeman one thing and something else to another. They asked why her dog didn't bark when the intruder entered the house. They asked why the kitchen sink was cleansed of its blood. They asked why she lied. And when they left her alone, she was sobbing, wretched woman for the jury to see. After hours of deliberation, not days, not weeks, after hours of deliberation, the jury on February 1st found Darlie Routier guilty of the murder of her son, Damon Christian. 3 days later, a somber Judge Toll peered down from his bench to the white-faced Darlie before him and read her the court's decided penalty. It was death. And rightfully so. There were some other things here when I was researching where they were still discussing, because obviously in this country, when you're given death, they don't take you out right away and walk you up the gallows. You get plenty of times to appeal. And they're still discussing. There's still people who believe that it was not this woman. There's still people who think there was someone, an intruder who came in and did all of this, which I say bullshit to all of that. Because the one thing amongst all of it, and they talked about it here, and I think I don't think I know I said it. The number one thing on that list of questions should have been, why did this killer have to use a knife that was in the house? Why didn't this killer not bring his own? Even if he wanted to rape, why didn't he bring a weapon? And then when you find out later that the knife that was probably used to slice the screen was a bread knife that belonged to the family as well. What are we talking about here? So if you've been listening to the podcast for well before this, or this is the 62nd or 63rd one, you know how I feel when it comes to people who kill children. And you just couldn't kill this woman fast enough for me. You could not. But I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be here at Flow Productions in this beautiful studio. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to watch it here on YouTube. Don't forget, go ahead and give us a like here on YouTube if you're watching the video right now. If you're listening to the podcast, you guys know what you got to do. You got to subscribe, you got to like, you got to show a lot of love, and don't be afraid to send the links out to people if you're digging it. First time doing it on video, feel okay. I feel all right. Think I'm gonna get better dealing with the cameras and where the angles are and where I need to be here. But we'll get there. But thank you guys for still rocking with us. About the story you just heard, we sourced it from Darlie Routier, Doting Mother, Dangerous Mother by Joseph Geringer, True TV. And as I always like to say during the audio, and I get to say for the first time on video, remember, be aware of your surroundings, and we'll see you next week.